still remains one of the most beautiful points in St. Lucia in terms of vistas and the experience. And it's really a part of St. Lucia which truly has been almost hidden away for a lot of people.
We are of the firm view that inadequate studies have been done in order to inform how that development takes shape.
I have absolutely no problem with hotel development at all. I think we need as many as the island can stand comfortably for job creation, for everything. What our capacity, can we handle it? And yeah, if we can handle it, no problem. Handle it from the point of view of electricity and water and labor and environmental, all these taken into consideration. What always strikes me, and that's kind of, is why do they have to have all? Why do they have to have hundreds of acres? All? Why do they have to squeeze the local population out completely? You know, that's kind of what is driving me to take that little exploration, because that seems to be the way it works now, just by all, and something definitely is wrong with coming in and buying all.
I'd always had a very strong passion in history and geography and the island, and you know, I would always be all around with my dad and my family, different parts of the country. So I certainly always, my upbringing was, I suppose, privileged in that I got to know my island very well, got to understand it. I mean, there's a little picture I have in the album of this 1986 dig that they did down in Pretdekai, in the canals area. University of Vienna went in there and they were doing some archaeological digs of Amerindians, and I was just about 2-3 years old at the time. I think it was 87. From that perspective, certainly, thinking about it, children need to get a taste of it from a very early age. But that's when I joined the trust, and then I also eventually became a member of the St. Lucia National Trust Council. So I'm an elected member of that council, and with the exception of maybe one break in between there, I've been on the council for quite a number of years since then.
Why do you think St. Lucians have such a difficulty with appreciating history? Well, our history. Why is this such a challenge for St. Lucians?
Right. Well, the vast majority of St. Lucians aren't even exposed to history at school. The little that they get, maybe at primary level, is very, very generic. Some of it is even outdated. It's not even detailed enough for them to understand who they are as an important. And that's the important thing about history. And geography as well. It really should start where you are, so that you can get a sense of place or a sense of identity. So if history is not really doing that, then it's missing the mark. And they're not experiencing it. They're not going out. They're not seeing the buildings. They're not seeing the ruins. They're not seeing the battlefields. They're not seeing the bones. There's no museum in St. Lucia, you know, that where you can actually bring students to actually visualize and get a broader sense of what's going on. So I think the absence of those institutions and the absence of the proper teaching of it and a continuous teaching of it, it's not enough to just end it at grade 6 at this point in time. There really needs to be a continuous part of history on the curriculum. But the average St. Lucian, when you tell them about Secret Beach, you tell them about Donkey Beach, you tell them about Cactus Valley, they really wouldn't know. And the St. Lucia National Trust has had a bit of a love affair with that whole northeast coast for quite some time, because it was realized that this was clearly a really interesting area of St. Lucia by virtue of its wilderness, by virtue of its lack of development, thankfully perhaps so. And the history lends itself to that too, because it's not that, in fact, it was one of the earliest areas of development, a European settlement, but because of hurricanes, because of for the French Revolution, the destruction of towns like Dauphin, a lot of these settlements, and of course because of water scarcity in that region, those areas never really did very well economically. So they ended up getting abandoned, and they were, because of the absence of a road linking it, that which used to be there, the Chemin Royal, but that was never really developed way beyond the early French developers. As a result of that, became some of the areas where you had the last vestiges of really important biodiversity, both flora and fauna.
How does an EIA approve a golf course in proximity to another golf course in an area where we have significant water challenges?
But what you're raising is very critical, because for this new Cabot development, there has not been an EIA, right? An environmental impact assessment. The last impact assessment was done for Raffles, that Raffles project, and that was somewhere back in 2005 or 2006. So you're already talking about a 15-year-old proposal, and that's just not acceptable, really, because even since then, our body of knowledge about that site has actually changed. For one, certainly on the archaeological side, there was a dig which was done by University of Leiden out of the Netherlands, and they came down and they looked at that the Anslavut area, which there had been some archaeological work done in the past decades gone, but not for maybe about 3 decades or so. And they looked at that site on the north side, which is on the south side of the Cabot site, and at Kazaba, and clearly found a settlement, a pre-Columbian settlement. Very interesting site in terms of, and what you could learn there in terms of how these people lived and how they buried their dead within the homes that they lived in. It's a private landholding, and we can't necessarily dictate exactly what happens. And of course, if there was to be a major shift, there'd have to be at the government level a major shift in terms of land use. But if it is deemed to be suitable for a golf experience, and if they can in fact address a lot of these other issues in terms of water scarcity, as you pointed out, and how they're going to be handling that, and I mean, just on the topic of water, of course, people talk quite a bit about desalination without appreciating that it can have environmental impacts as well. It's a very costly undertaking in and of itself. And also, yes, there's this whole talk about maybe the reuse of water coming out of the Beausejour treatment plant, but of course we all know
that's been used
that has been tried already, and there are issues with respect to that, and I think they're still trying to overcome some of those issues.
When you look at golf course development, there are so many things that you can put in place to minimize the water demand, in the type of grass that you put there, how you collect water that falls onto that property and store it and reuse it, if it's associated with some residential type development, collecting of that wastewater and reusing it, basically having a zero discharge type environment. So basically collecting all the rainwater that you can and really minimizing or eliminating the demand for access to municipal supplies that you and I are relying on. Because golf courses require a lot of water. We know that we have not done a major development of water supply here since 1990s, right? So we're reaching capacity already, and of course we know the problems at Roseau in terms of the siltation. So really it's a pressure that our water system just cannot survive.
Our biggest concerns really would have been the coastal access. Protection of existing livelihoods. There are a lot of individuals who use that site for horseback riding. It's a beautiful experience. It's perhaps one of the best tours that you can get of St. Lucia when you're experiencing that part of the country. So we really wanted to push for the whole issue of coastal access, ensuring that beaches remain open and public, and so that persons can actually enjoy those spaces, those really beautiful spaces, so that it can't just be this enclave excluding everybody else. It has to be able to be utilized for the good of everybody.
How much land does a championship golf course occupy in the real world? Apparently it's between 109 to 190 acres, smallest to largest. In St. Lucia, the development is occupying 378 acres. So I decided I'm gonna go take a fly over and see just how much land this development is actually going to occupy, and why it is that they would need to have all the land in an area where people have been recreating for a long time. So we're gonna go down to Kasamba and do a walk around and do a flight to see what exactly is the Cabot development area look like. Okay, let's go take a look. I'm just amazed that these developments have to take up so much property. I mean, this is a lot of land to be clearing for one developer. I mean, it's not like we haven't seen what happens. The parity is not that far away. When all the land was taken for a project that eventually didn't happen, it just seems like a lot of land, and that it didn't have to be you get all the property. It has to be a better way to do things. This is just not, it doesn't look right, and I'm sure it is not right.
Well, it's a very big project, and golf courses are notorious for wreaking great environmental damage on the properties that they develop. Our issue was with the way in which the Development Control Authority managed or has been managing this particular development proposal. So we have concerns relating to almost every development issue. Our concerns relate to the archaeology on that site that we both know about and that is likely to be there, that is yet to be discovered. There are the environmental issues in terms of the biodiversity at that site, which appears to be just disappearing before the Cabot tractors. They're clearing land without putting in any measures to manage erosion and sedimentation. So those are issues down the line in terms of coastal water quality, implications for fishermen and recreational users.
Pretty amazing how much land has been cleared and how barren the whole area is. I'm just amazed that these developments have to take all the land, everything. That just does not seem right sometimes.
From a national trust perspective, we wouldn't go there in terms of the quantum of land that's being developed, except to say that it must be done in a responsible and sustainable way. And it must consider traditional existing rights and uses. I work in the private sector as a consultant, mainly dealing with environmental, disaster, climate change, those kinds of things. Before I went into the private sector in the early 2000s, I worked with government. So I've been in the public as well as the private sector. I worked in the Ministry of Planning, I worked in solid waste, I worked in water, I worked with NDC, which is now Invest St. Lucia. When a developer decides to do something on a property, we have to think from the public sector perspective of how that's going to affect the whole community, both in the locality and beyond, because there are potentially negative implications for the entire St. Lucia by irresponsibly developing this site. Fishermen from down south can be affected by what's going on there when the rain starts to fall, right? Simply because the measures have not been put in place. Why have they not been put in place? Because they're being allowed to develop without doing the studies. No environmental impact assessment was done. When you do an environmental impact assessment, and when we say environment, we talk very broadly: environment, social, archaeology, whatever the potential impacts are, you think of those issues. So when you don't do those studies, you don't put the measures in place, and you don't put the protections in place, and you impact everybody.
Yeah.
Well, I think there are numerous concerns. First of all, it started with a lack of water in Cap Estate that we all suffer from, as residents here, and the issues that might come from having a second golf course, which of course uses a lot of water resources. So concerns that doesn't impact the north of the island negatively. But beyond that, that's the area where this is going to be. It is heavily used by locals, and more so in recent times, whether it's people using the beaches or hiking the trails for leisure and health, or for micro business related to the tourism industry, horse riding, fishermen who fish with nets or lines, whether again for their own micro business or fathers and sons, fathers and daughters. So my concern was also that we don't lose that access, especially because in St. Lucia we see our access to the Queen's Chain area being reduced fairly quickly and severely as tourism grows. We're now, I think, pre-COVID, of course, we were at about 6 tourists per St. Lucian in terms of numbers. And when you have the cruise boats in particular, you see how quickly our access to the coastal areas and good swimming beaches is being eroded at a pace that none of us really could have foreseen.
So where we know that a lot of people use that coastal zone and what is Queen's Chain, which belongs to the people, doesn't belong to the developer, certainly the plans have to reflect how it is that use, traditional use and right will be respected, so that the people who go there to fish with their fishing lines can continue to do that. The people who have their horseback business going along that coastal zone can continue to do that. The lady who has a lease of Queen's Chain to run her restaurant and has been doing so for the last how many decades has the right to continue to do that. We have not seen any document that quantifies the value of these types of uses, right? And shows how it is that those types of uses can continue.
I would still hold out that if we're looking for a balanced result, that the developers reach out to the community engagement and that they find a way to draw back from the coast. You know, I know that in their marketing they have these phrases and pictures that imply that they will be literally up to the water's edge, and in some cases it will be private access, which worries us very, very seriously. And we feel very strongly that they could still have a wonderful golf course, a fantastic resort, if they pulled back from the coast and allowed the paths and natural areas that are currently being used by the public to continue to be used. So when we met with the developers, we had a variety of feelings within our advocacy group, and they ranged from leave the place alone as it is, don't do anything, to we wish it could have been an eco-resort developed there with trails and things, to okay, if you have to develop a golf course and a resort, then minimum leave the coastal area that is so heavily used open to continued use by the people who currently use it, and of course your resort guests could use it on an equal basis with us. And there was one other area, of course, that was of prime importance, is that it is an archaeologically important site, and we know by Kazumba Beach there's a very important settlement that includes very unusual burial practices for Amerindians. And the advice from Laura Jean-Pierre was that they should not do the development without having an archaeological impact assessment.
There will always be new threats. The people will come and go, and then this need to continuously engage the community, explain, teach them, help them to understand what they have, what assets they have, and what opportunities that they have, so that they don't see conservation as preservation. We're not putting something in a museum and saying that you can't touch it. You know, we're saying that you've got to be able to use it sustainably, that there are certain things you can do and there's certain things that you shouldn't do. And so that's why we really need to do a lot more community engagement as an organization. I think hopefully if we can continue to get good partners in media, good partners in the communities, good partners in the government sector, I think there is certainly a good possibility moving forward.
So it's been kind of an interesting little exploration. You know, I think I get it. These things are going to continue to happen because most people don't care. Most people don't care unless it affects them. If it does not affect them in some direct way, then the problem is somebody else's problem. And that happens because the people have so many problems on top of problems that who's going to care about scraping some land for a golf course on property that they never go to? They don't care. So this is a Kappa State problem, and the rest of St. Lucia thinks, you guys deserve to have your little fight because we're fighting for everything else already. So that's what happens when people are all broken up into little pieces. You get this. You get to lose the land. You get to lose all the land, which is what my problem is. You get to lose all the land and go find somewhere else to bathe.